I was born in a military family. My father was a high-ranking officer of the Soviet Army General Staff, inspector of land forces, stationed outside of USSR in every quote-unquote brotherly country or liberated country of the world. I graduated from Oriental Studies Institute, affiliated to Moscow State University in 1963. I started working with Novosti Press Agency, the biggest propaganda and ideological subversion organization of USSR, which is directly under KGB. Ostensibly, it's a public news agency. Novosti in Russian language means news, but there are no news. It's mainly propaganda. My first job was a translator with Economical Aid Group in India. We were building refineries and other industrial projects in public sector, socialist sector of India. My last job was press officer of the Soviet Embassy in New Delhi. I defected in 1970, landed in Canada, worked for several years as a producer of Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, overseas service in Russian language, similar to Voice of America. Then I was teaching at University of Toronto, Political Science Department, McGill University, Slavic Studies, and School of Journalism, Ottawa, in Carleton University in Ottawa. Last year, I joined a small Russian language publishing house here in Los Angeles, and now I'm a political analyst for weekly Panorama newspaper. Lumumba University language instruction was my so-called extracurricular activity, which is usually given to Soviet young communists as a non-paid job to prove loyalty to the party. I was instructing students from Asia, Latin America, and Africa before they entered an ideological indoctrination class. It was mainly Russian language instruction, after which the students usually joined 2-year or 3-year extensive course in Marxist-Leninist ideological indoctrination, plus their own subjects of their choice, medicine, physics, chemistry, whatever. If after 5 or 6 years studying, they are proven to be, well, flexible, loyal, cynical enough to follow the Soviet foreign policy, they are being transferred to a KGB school for a period of 2 years, after which they are being dispatched back to their native countries and become so-called sleepers, the word originated from sleeping. For several years, they sleep in their own countries doing nothing. Sometimes they're pursuing their own careers, become lawyers, doctors, teachers, taxi drivers, barbers, and they spring into action after many years of destabilization of their own countries as Soviet agents. Therefore, all of a sudden you discover well-established lawyers in a country like Nicaragua who are, for some strange reason, are bitterly against quote-unquote American imperialism and idealistically for Soviet Marxist-Leninist imperialism. I joined Novosti Press Agency before I graduated from the Oriental Studies Institute, where I studied Hindi and Urdu, 2 languages of Indian subcontinent. Urdu is the language of Pakistan and Hindi is the language of India. The journalistic part of my training was ordinary journalism, mass media, communication theories and studies. Together with that, we had a very extensive training in military, civil defense, intelligence, and ideological subversion. So even before I graduated, I started working with Novosti Press Agency, first as a translator, interpreter, and guide with foreign delegations who were invited to USSR and who were shown all the beauties of socialism and dispatched back to their countries to explain to their people how beautiful is socialism. My role was directly linked with KGB activities of brainwashing and psychological assessment of these guests. If they showed any sign of flexibility, which means they showed that they were recruitable, I passed them over to professional KGB recruiters, and from there on they were actively being involved in ideological subversion and propaganda, both in USSR and in their own countries. Well, decision, of course, was very painful and difficult. But on the other hand, I didn't have any illusions or allusions about the Soviet system and communist or socialist system. It's the most rotten and unworking system in the world. Some people call it state capitalism, socialism, centralized planning, whatever. It doesn't really matter what kind of name you attach to the system. Basically, if you're a religious person, it's a devilish, satanistic system which appeals only to the most primitive, negative side of human nature. The basis of that system is denial of private property, human dignity, and personal responsibility, and of course any religious affiliation of a human being to God as a supreme being. My dissatisfaction, disillusionment, if you can call it, because I never was illusioned with the communism, started as early as from age 6, I guess. The first shock was after the Second World War, when most of the children of my age understood that United States is the friend with whom together Soviet people defeated Nazism, German fascism, all of a sudden turned into an enemy. And all of a sudden the propaganda turned 180 degrees around, and we were brainwashed in the spirit of hatred to everything which is American. But how could you explain to a child of 6 years old who owes his survival to American spam, condensed milk, egg powder, and things which you probably people never remember because nobody eats them these days, spam meat, you know what I'm talking about? How can you explain to them that these delicious things came from an enemy who wants to subvert and destroy us? It's impossible, because the child remembers when he was hungry, he was eating spam and drinking condensed American milk with the American eagle on the label. So all the efforts of the Soviet propaganda to convince me that America is bad was futile, naturally. That was the first shock. The second was this 20th Congress of the Soviet Communist Party, when Khrushchev revealed the atrocities of Stalin, terrorism, and murder, systematic murder of millions of innocent people. That was another greatest shock. And the third shock, of course, when I was already grown up, a student, invasion into Czechoslovakia in 1968. That was the last point. And when I was in India, acting as a Soviet official, a Soviet diplomat, I understood that sooner or later I have to defect and to explain what exactly I was doing in India. I fell in love with that country because at that time this country didn't do any harm to any neighbors, least of all to the Soviet Union. And yet we did so much harm to that country that I decided to defect and explain it, first to Indians, then to American politicians, intelligence communities, and media. Unfortunately, I didn't have much success because my stories were treated with a great skepticism. I was called paranoid, McCarthyist, fascist, Cold War maniac, and other names which I don't want to mention here. And it took me quite a number of years to understand that I'm talking to people who are trying to prevent average American from knowing the truth about communism. The basic methods are not that much different from activities of any public relation officer from any big company. Say Coca-Cola, I bet. They have their own department of public relations and press relations. But the ultimate goal, the ultimate purpose is different. If Coca-Cola wants to make profit and to sell more Coca-Cola to nations of the world, the Soviet Union, the ultimate purpose of the Soviet system is not to sell anything, least of all ideology, is to destroy the civilization on which the affluence and freedom based, and replace it with a system of total control over life of human beings, the system of total exploitation. That's the ultimate purpose. My specific measures, which I was forced to do, unwillingly of course, but I had to do them just to promote myself further and further, is bribery, corruption, befriending politicians, members of parliament, influential scholars, members of civil service, businessmen. In other words, anyone who has any anything to do with shaping of public opinion in the interests of the Soviet foreign policy. That would include a long process which sometimes is unnoticeable to an average person. It's a long-term process which is called ideological subversion. It's unnoticeable as movement of a small hand of a clock. You know it's going around, but even if you watch it intensely, you don't see the movement. The eventual result is befriending these people and trying to get them involved in the activity in the interests of the Soviet foreign policy. The immediate impulse when I learned that the Soviet Embassy, Department of Research and Counter-Propaganda, of which I was a deputy chief, is engaged neither in research nor in counter-propaganda. It is a department which is compiling information of private nature on individuals divided in two groups, good boys and bad boys. The sympathetic people were promoted in media and public life. The people who were opposed to the Soviet foreign policy were blackwashed, blackmailed, and destroyed, first morally and sometimes physically too. Understanding of what I was doing came to me when I looked through a press release of United States Information Service describing an incident in a South Vietnamese city of Hue, captured by communists from Hanoi for 48 hours. Then it was recaptured by United States and South Vietnamese armies, and to their horror they discovered that within 2 nights the communists could manage to round up more than 15,000 people and execute them. Most of these people were either sympathetic to the United States or to the Western culture, or directly involved in activities supporting United States President in South Vietnam, agents of CIA naturally, even barbers because they know too much. They were executed, and United States intelligence couldn't figure out how could they possibly do it in such short period of time. Later on they discovered, they found out from several defectors that long before communists occupied that city, there was an extensive omnipresent network of informers who knew exactly the addresses, the names, the whereabouts of each individual who was later executed. When I turned to my own files, I discovered that basically that information exists in my department. So it doesn't take much intelligence to understand what I was doing in India. I was compiling information. Comes revolution, these people would be executed. Indirectly, I was involved in a criminal activity, in mass murder. I decided to defect and explain it to Americans, and the response I already described. I was called a paranoid. But I decided to defect and try nevertheless. There's another long story. It's virtually impossible to defect in India simply because Indian government, under pressure from the Soviet government, if you can call them government. I don't call them government, I call them junta. They adopted a law as early as in 61 or 62, after Stalin's daughter defection especially. That law states that no embassy, no foreign legation on the territory of Indian Republic has the right to extend political asylum to any defector from any country, which is it's a masterpiece of hypocrisy. No other defector but a Soviet one needs a political asylum. If you are a Canadian or American, if you want to be nasty to your own government, the maximum you can do is just to pick up a phone and make a dirty phone call to your ambassador. Buy yourself a ticket and get lost. What happens to a Soviet defector under that law? If I knock a door of United States Embassy, by that law, the American diplomats have to turn me back to the Indian police, and Indian police takes me directly back to the Soviet embassy. And that's the end of my defection. So knowing that perfectly well and having contacts both with Indian police and American media corps, I understood that the only way for me was to disappear for a while. And the best way I discovered was to mix with a group of hippies. Mind you, that was the time I was 13 years younger, so I looked slightly different, of course. I studied so-called counterculture in India. Sometimes good, sincere young people who wanted to study Oriental mysticism and culture and religion, but most of them were simply easygoing individuals who were delighted with exotic life and the easiness with which they can purchase hashish and other drugs in India. And sometimes they traveled Indian subcontinent without any identification papers. So the best way to escape detection was to mix with the group of hippies and travel in India until the campaign in the media and in the police search will subside. All the newspapers in India carried my picture and announcement of the police that anyone coming forward with information about my whereabouts would receive 5,000 or 2,000 rupees. Knowing that perfectly well, I just walked in there barefoot with beads and blue jeans, smoking hash and enjoying life. Until I found sympathetic journalists who smuggled me from India to Greece. Mind you, that was a military dictatorship at that time. Then only I approached American CIA, and they helped me to land in Canada as a legit, ordinary immigrant. So now I'm a Canadian citizen, as you can see from my patriotic tie. Canada is a kind of middle of the road country where there are so many various ethnic groups that another strange character who speaks both Russian and English and two Oriental languages, I didn't have any problem fitting into academic circles, and first being just a student at the University of Toronto, and later a producer with the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. I think it was successful, and until and unless there'll be follow-up to that movie, it will remain as an open wound in the United States, as a scare tactic, which in this particular case, I'm not sure whether KGB paid for production of that movie or not, but it's totally irrelevant. What is the most important, unless after seeing the tragic sequences of the nuclear attack, American population is not explained what to do about it. If you still stop at that and let it be, obviously, this is the scare tactic, this is the greatest harm done to the United States by Americans, by American filmmaker. I bet Andropov and all his disinformation system could not possibly do that much harm to the United States. When you see something obviously sponsored by the Soviets, you understand, well, this is propaganda. You may or may not agree with this depending on your background and intelligence and education. But here it's a subtle approach, playing on the most sensitive strings of your soul, appealing to the most basic instincts of human nature, survival. But there are no answers. How to survive? Well, obviously, disarmament is not the answer, simply because some people naively expect Andropov to blush out of shame and reduce the number of warheads. It doesn't happen this way. We are facing unresponsive, irresponsible group of people for whom nuclear war is not a theory, it's a practice, and the military strategy of the Soviet Union is designed to do nuclear war and to survive and possibly to win. I started my military training when I was 6 or 7 years old, when I entered secondary school, and I graduated in '63 after almost 15 years of continuous training as a junior lieutenant of reserve of the Soviet Army. And psychologically, every Soviet citizen is well prepared for war, nuclear war. And technically, he is equipped with facilities and the knowledge how to use it in case of war or natural disaster. It doesn't matter. Survival tactics and survival methods are taught extensively in various manners. They are exposed to documentary movies about nuclear war. They know the technical data of radiation or contamination of air and land. They know the organizational patterns of civil defense to such an extent that even if there's no nuclear attack, even if there's conventional warfare, each individual at a certain time knows exactly where to go, what to do, where is the shelter, whom to call by telephone, which is not the case, unfortunately, in the United States. I think if a bomb, ordinary bomb, maybe a stink bomb is dropped in the middle of Los Angeles, most of the people will not die of atomic radiation. They will die of panic. They will run, and the traffic jams and the panic will kill more people than anything else. And where do they go? Is there any literature about how to protect an individual? Is the medical first aid treatment? It's not taught to kids in American colleges, unfortunately. For example, there's obvious tension in the world. Television newscasts inform American family about happenings in East and West Germany. And only at the last moment they decide to bring the canned food down to the basement. It's sheer idiocy. Why not to have them in the basement at peacetime? Number two, there's very realistic picture of what happens when the first nuclear bomb strikes a big city, Kansas City, I think. And people start, a big panoramic picture shows almost an anthill when people are disoriented totally. That would produce love in Russia, because unlike that, Soviets know exactly what to do. There'll be much less panic, if at all. I know about infiltration of KGB into peace movement probably as much as an average American who reads newspapers systematically. But obviously I'm aware that the World Peace Council is a front organization of the KGB. Ramesh Chandra I know personally, both in India and USSR. I worked with delegations of various peaceniks who came to the World Congress of Peace Council in Moscow. I think it was in 1961 or 62. Yeah, it was before Cuban crisis. And at that time, they struck me as people who are pathologically unable to see the truth, not to talk about the military aspects. When as a translator and a guide, I used to take them to places in Moscow which are not supposed to be for foreigners' eyes. They didn't want to see it. They had their preconceived ideas. They were suffering from self-importance. They thought it's a great honor to sit in the Kremlin, in the Palace of Congresses, next to a debile from Kremlin, and talk about peace as if that person from Politburo means anything in peace movement. Self-delusion is the most predominant phenomenon among these people. Ramesh Chandra is a very shrewd politician who takes advantage of naive, misguided, idealistically minded, sometimes sincere people. But he is, my impression is that he's totally sold himself to the Soviets. He receives his payments or royalties or whatever you can call it in the form of prizes. Of course, it's very embarrassing if you approach a person of his caliber with money, with cash, and say, "Here, Comrade Ramesh Chandra, there's money for your propaganda in the interests of the Soviet Union." It's very unpolite. So instead, the Soviet Union creates artificial international bodies such as Jawaharlal Nehru Peace Committee, which consists of various progressive leaders, writers. Sometimes they're known figures, philosophers, educationalists. Sometimes they probably feel that if there's no other possibility to express the desire for peace, at least there is some legitimate overt activity where they can express themselves. That's okay. And they think they are too smart not to see that part of it is Soviet propaganda. Okay, we are smart. We are not going to allow them to use us for propaganda purposes. This is wishful thinking, because after 5 or 6 visits to USSR, everything is paid by the Soviet government. After spending several vacations on a Black Sea coast, luxurious atmosphere with 2 or 3 nice girls, interpreters, lots of vodka and caviar, books published, vapid books which nobody reads in the United States, all of a sudden published in millions of copies in USSR in various languages, that tickles their ego. They think they are somebodies all of a sudden. It's difficult to resist the temptation. Ramesh Chandra is exactly that type of personality. He was approached at a very early stage, and he didn't have willpower and moral principles to resist the temptation, to resist the approach. And by now he's just a pawn in the game, high-ranking pawn. And if he is dismissed or dies natural death, there will be another, the line of people who would like to take his place. Yes, KGB takes very active part in the peace movement. And if these people were sincere, as they say they are, they would start demonstrating in Kremlin, or I mean in Red Square, not in Washington, D.C., or in the Central Park in New York, or in Los Angeles. But they don't have courage, they don't have guts to go to Russia and protest against the nuclear armament of the Soviet Union. Therefore, I agree that they are misguided, but I think they are cowards. They are unprincipled, dishonest people. And there's no justification that they are misguided or poorly informed. It's their fault that they're poorly informed. There's enough information, there's enough possibility. In case of United States citizens, there's enough freedom to do what their consciousness should tell them to do. Go to Russia and protest against armament. It doesn't take much courage to take part in demonstration in Los Angeles. But if you're really genuinely concerned about peace, tell it to Brezhnev, tell it to Andropov, and we'll see how courageous and sincere you are. They don't do it. Well, the greatest strength, I think, is the basic principle of American democracy, common sense, and the value of the principles of private property and respect to human dignity and individual rights. The weakness is the permissiveness and lack of moral stamina, which, if you are a religious person, could be interpreted as probably alienation from religion, alienation from God. Thinking too much in materialistic terms, thinking in short span of time for pragmatic advantages, disregarding the perspective of civilization. Some philosopher, I forget his name, I was a bad student in Moscow, said that the level of civilization is in direct proportion to the time span that human being thinks in future, for future. The least civilized people live today, this minute. The more civilized nations think about tomorrow, 10 years from now, 100 years from now. Well, this is one of the definitions of... Unfortunately, Americans are made to think in shorter and shorter time span terms. This is the greatest weakness. So therefore, enjoy life and make love, not war. I think that willpower and revitalization of traditional moral values and principles is the most desirable thing now, today. The sooner the better. The things, the principles and values on which the affluence and success of American civilization depends and based upon should be immediately revitalized and brought back to school programs, to media and, let's face it, propaganda. I'm not afraid of this word, unlike the left liberal journalists who think, oh, well, it's propaganda. I don't see anything wrong in propagating the basic moral principles and values on which America is built. Willpower, faith, unshakable faith that this country, this civilization is right and the enemy is wrong. No amount or no number of nuclear warheads and no size of the army will help United States to survive, whether there's nuclear war or conventional warfare. Vietnam proved very clearly that with all the technology, with all the supersonic bombers and napalm and whatnot, electronic gadgets and cold beer and Coca-Cola, you cannot defeat an enemy unless you are fighting and have faith in the righteousness of your fight. So that's the most urgent thing, I think. Wake up and convince yourself that you're on the right side. There should not be no neutralism or objectivity. Or objectivity is good when you are discussing philosophical concepts. In today's world, if you are neutral, you are already an enemy of your own country. You have to actively take part of your country, your side. One of the reasons of my defection is that I took side. I was decided to take part, to take choice, to make my own personal choice. For some strange reason today it's very fashionable, it's considered to be an intellectual chic, not to take sides. Academic media, academic circles, Hollywood stars, politicians, they think it's very fashionable, it's intellectual to be non-allied, non-committed, neutral. It's not intellectual, it's suicidal. Suicidal. Okay, I'll start with a short explanation. I'm going to show you some slides now. The things that you're going to see, there's nothing new actually. They're reproductions from various media organs in the United States, USSR. Probably you see these pictures 100 times a day. I'm going to give you a different viewpoint on the same things, same facts that you see, and probably don't take much trouble to understand and think what you are seeing. I don't know if you heard my introduction. I'm an ideological subverter, yes, from Russia. Okay. Okay, it's the idea of showing the slides to you is just to provoke questions in your mind, and later on, if you still have patience with me, I will explain how exactly the system of ideological indoctrination and subversion works. Well, we know that we are living in a time of peace, and we know that recent walkout from the Geneva talks by the Soviets is centered around the nuclear arms and rockets. We don't see much about the Soviet preparedness, a Soviet viewpoint on the military strategy. Well, this is a selection of pictures, only pictures. Confucius said that one picture tells more than 1,000 words. These pictures are from everyday newspapers in USSR. This is what the Soviet citizen looks upon every day. Basically, this is a militaristic spirit, pictures of foreign delegates observing the rockets passing the Red Square. The idea of invasion, unlike in the United States, is not being criticized by the Soviet media at all. On the contrary, it's being forcefully encouraged from the age of, say, 5 or 6 year old. Every Soviet student or schoolboy has to go through military training. This is a picture from a special military school where young kids, well, maybe 4 or 5 years old, are being trained to be future officers of the Soviet army. That's what they do when they grow up. These are the Soviet sailors, Navy officers in a foreign country. We criticize a lot American presence in foreign countries, but we never criticize and we never pay too much attention about these planes landing with ammunition and firearms in, say, countries like Ethiopia. These are the pictures in Time magazine which probably you've seen and then forgotten about it. These are the Soviet tanks on foreign territory. Are there any protest demonstrations in Los Angeles or New York City? No. These are the Soviet military advisors. Nobody tells them, Russians, go home. How it starts? The media obviously plays a great role. This is a political cartoon from a Western newspaper. You see, it was published sometimes after the Second World War. These 4 columns of peace, pay attention to whom they are being erected. Roosevelt on the left, Churchill on the right, and Stalin in the middle. A peacemaker, Stalin. Okay, this is another thing. Chicago Tribune, January 1945. Destiny's Child. New Year, 45, is born. Look who is looking with love and affection. Churchill, Roosevelt, Chiang Kai-shek, and Stalin. And this is how the Soviet media describes Churchill as a warmonger. Искусство, Moscow, 1951. This is how the Soviet media presents American militarism linked with Nazism. This is how the Soviet media illustrates South African colonialism, not much different from a political cartoon in the New York Times or Los Angeles Times. As a matter of fact, almost similar. Growth of inflation due to military expenses. A political cartoon from Pravda newspaper. It could be published as it is in Los Angeles Times. Nobody would wonder. NATO is criticized by the Soviet media, but so it is by the American media. Law and order, justifying the former military criminals. This picture. This is what there's a number of books which I selected in an average university bookstore. Most of them are left-wing propaganda. Erich Fromm, May Men Prevail? The Indochina story, of course, from the viewpoint of left. Lenin's work, How to Deal with Communists, by a former ambassador to USSR. Marx and Engels, Lenin, Herbert Marcuse. The communist movement. These are the books which are included in the list of reading for an average student of political science department in any college of Canada or United States. These are the books which are on sale in United States and Canada. Soviet propaganda. These are the booklets and magazines published by Novosti Press Agency, for which I worked for 12 years. No restriction for these booklets. I found them on the campus of Toronto University. Half of these books I edited myself when I was working for Novosti in Moscow. This is a very interesting thing. It doesn't say much unless I explain what it is. These are the seals attached to crates of books imported from USSR to Montreal. As you can easily see, the seal is unbroken, which means that the customs in Canada didn't bother to see what's inside. And as I know from my personal experience, we used to import machine guns, AK-47 and ammunition through India to Bangladesh in exactly the same crates, signed printed matter to Dhaka University. This is what editor of Time magazine suggests you to read at the time of invasion, fall of Southeast Asia to communists. Solzhenitsyn's Gulag Archipelago is on the bottom of the list according to the editor's choice. Why on bottom of the list? These are the books which are never included in the list of compulsory reading to in any university or college in the United States or Canada. Look what the student is missing. The Death of Stalin, Childhood in Prison, Ferment in Ukraine, Russian Secret Service, The Great Terror. These are the books which for some strange reason Americans are denied the freedom and right to read. Why America is in global retreat? Have you ever seen this book on a campus? No, of course not. I know that. Anthony Satin, National Suicide. Have you ever had a chance to read that book? Oh, you had? Well,
This is another very interesting thing. A description how drugs penetrate into Western society originated in communist world. For some strange reason, that textbook is never included in the list of compulsory reading for students of political science or international affairs. This is the book written by a former member of Communist Party in Czechoslovakia, explaining the tactics of subversion. For some strange reason, it was not published in the United States or Canada. The author had to pay for the publication himself after defecting to the West. This is another interesting example. Exoneration and Ultimatum, written by Richard Romer, a science fiction novel about invasion of the United States into Canada to expropriate the oil and natural gas resources in that neighboring friendly nation. Why it took invasion, I don't understand. 51% or more of the companies are already belong to the United States in Canada, as probably you know already. Who is the author? Richard Romer is a dynamic and dedicated exponent of the needs of potential. And so anyway, he's a friend of Pierre Trudeau, a former military officer. And what he writes is something that Andropov probably would be very happy about. He describes a situation when the only thing that saves Canada from United States military occupation is a call from Andropov to the President of the United States, threatening him with the reply or with the military answer to an invasion of Canada by United States. And this is written by a close friend of Pierre Trudeau, a politician, a former military man. Why? Is he a paranoid or am I a paranoid? These are the three books published almost simultaneously, sometimes in the middle of 70s. CIA and the Cult of Intelligence. CIA Diary by Philip Age and the KGB by John Barron. I tried to buy the KGB, but it was not in the bookstores of Canada or United States. The previous two books on the left were. This is the author of the most anti-American book, The Defector to the Communist Side, Philip Age. He is alive. Nobody is threatening his life. Nobody is poisoning him with the poisoned umbrella. This is, you know who? He's criticizing CIA for developing a gun to kill communist agents. And he tries to present it as a crime on behalf of United States Intelligence Agency. Why is it a crime? To defend you from the communist agents and to develop a secret gun, which is silent, is a crime. Is there any logic? I don't see any. This is the fellow who also criticizes the United States CIA for developing technical means of bugging USSR embassies on the territory of United States. Why not? I don't see any reason why not. But Mondale obviously does. He knows better. These are the authors who published lists of American agents stationed all over the world. They are alive. They actually made quite a lot of money on that publication. And this is the victim. The chief of CIA in Greece was killed when the book of the previous two Americans was published. This fellow is dead. The other two are not. Siberia in 1971 was visited by a group of politicians from Canada, and this is the report about that visit. This is the group. We're shaking hands with the Soviet ambassador. This is a Soviet technical miracle, a pipeline on thermofrost or something. In other words, what Canadians were doing in early 60s is presented to Canadian public as an achievement, a great technological achievement in USSR. This is the route of their travel in Siberia. The Canadians covered that much of distance. Please remember that map. I will come back to that question. This is a book published by a Canadian author, Farley Mowat. By the way, Never Cry Wolf, a movie which is made on the basis of Farley-Mowatt's book. He's a nice fellow, drinks a lot of vodka. He was a guest of Novosti Press Agency, which I was working for. This is another book written by Farley-Mowat after returning from Siberia. He was accompanied by a person like myself, a Novosti Press Agency journalist. Glorification of Siberia. This is what this is the route, I promised you to come back to that map, which Farley-Mowat, a Canadian progressive writer, covered when he was in USSR. This is what he makes Canadians to believe Siberia looks like. It does, of course. Baikal Lake is a very beautiful natural phenomenon. A nicely dressed Soviet Eskimos or Chukchas, I don't know, some ethnic minorities, friendly talking to each other in fluent English. Nice motel somewhere in the middle of Siberia. Huge hydroelectrical projects. It is true, it is built, but they never mentioned by whom. And this is what I eventually wanted to show you. These are the two routes. First one in red ink by Canadian government delegation. In blue ink by the author Farley-Mowat, accompanied by Novosti Press Agency. The black dots are locations of Soviet concentration camps. These people were shown the places where the slave labor is being used by the Soviet government, if you call them government. I call them junta of mass murderers. But there is not a single mentioning, not a word, that those beautiful electric stations were built by slave labor. This is what Canadian reader will never see in the report by Canadian politicians or the progressive writer Farley-Mowat. You say, well, that's Russia. This is not a kindergarten. This is a prison for children of prisoners. These are the houses. If an American contractor would build a house like that, I think he will end up in jail. But this is what is being shown to some naive foreigners as achievements of Soviet technology. Naturally, if you follow the editor's choice and advice, you will never understand that the description, the most detailed description of Soviet concentration camp system is put on the bottom of the list. You say, well, maybe in USSR, the concentration camp is nothing surprising. Well, this is a concentration camp in Southeast Asia, in Cambodia. Same thing. Slave labor. This is what happens to slave laborers when they don't obey the orders. They are being executed, not by firing squad, because bullets are too expensive, by shovels, crushing skulls. This is the victory of communism for you. This is what happens to their children. And this is the originator of this slaughterhouse, Cambodian Premier Pol Pot, during interview with Time magazine. Very nice, plump, fatherly image. You are made to believe that Holocaust happened during the Second World War is something that may happen again. It may. But the originator of it may not necessarily be the Nazis. We don't have any Nazi submarines roaming around the shores of the United States and Canada. We have liberation forces. That's what Holocaust. This is happening right now after the so-called National Liberation Movement. This is a still from a movie, Holocaust, a television production. The Nazis are shooting the prisoners, the Jews. We are made to, well, it's horrible, of course, there's no denial. It happened many years ago, and the tactic, which I will explain you later if you have patience with me, is sidetracking your opinion from present danger to the past. From this is present time, this is past time. This is happening right now in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Is there any movie about Holocaust which happens now? No. This is what happens in, well, it did happen in Rhodesia before it becomes Zimbabwe. It's a black girl, by the way, not a white one. This is the result of the socialist movement. These people were killed by those who are now in power in Zimbabwe. And we call them reverend bishops or whatever. This is the supply of Soviet arms to Rhodesia before it turned into Zimbabwe. And this is a very interesting picture. A poor South African is showing his internal passport, saying that there's no freedom and he has to live wherever he's assigned to live by the police. For some strange reason, not a single media outlet in the United States makes a comparison, because in Russia every citizen has a passport like that. And the Asian ethnics in USSR do not have the right to live in those areas which are designed for the whites, and the other way around. But we are getting emotional about this passport. Why not about Soviet passport? The answer is flowing in the wind, how they sing. Okay, the feeling of guilt. Open any magazine. There are lots of pictures like that. Hungry people asking for your dollar. Donation. Think about it. Emma De Leon has no one else to turn to except you. See how many pictures? I collected them within 1 week. And who helps them? Rock stars. Through United Nations, UNICEF. And how they use this money? They buy arms. Have you noticed that countries like Philippines never ask for donations? Why? Because they have free market system. Oh yes, they have military dictatorship, oppression of civil rights. But for some strange reason, only those countries which are already liberated by Marxists are asking for your donations. Why? And when they get these donations, will you be my friend? This is what Time magazine wants you to think. If not, the implication is this is what's going to happen. Powezi, when white miners stationed in this small country, African country, were murdered by so-called National Liberation Movement. This is the result. Raped and murdered after your donations. And who is supporting these movements? Of course, United Nations. Okay, we'll come later on to the question of semantic manipulation. Everybody knows that United Nations is not united and it's not nations, but we continue to call them. I don't know how many people notice the striking similarity between the emblem of United Nations and emblem of the USSR. You think it's coincidence? The symbolism is obvious, unless you are blind, of course. And the creator of the United Nations Charter is an American, Alger Hiss, standing next to Comrade Molotov, sitting there on the left. We know he was a Soviet spy, but he is at large now. Alger Hiss, he is a lawyer, a respected citizen of the United States, a former Soviet spy. Well, you know, this guy is Daniel Ellsberg. He published secret papers of Pentagon. Why not of Soviet military-industrial complex? He is a respected citizen of the United States. Dr. Spock, Agony of Vietnam. I forget what's his name. Oh, yeah. How many men has to die before they understand I don't remember the lyrics of the song, but it was a very impressive song. When I was a Soviet student, I almost cried when I listened to that. And I thought, my God, what a nice fella. John Baez, very nice couple of kids. Jane Fonda, she was crying on location in Vietnam, beautifully filmed by American Hollywood filmmakers. What is she doing now? Did she ever defend both people? Did she say a word in defense of Vietnamese? say about horrors of coming out of this. No, she's busy preaching the health or whatever. And also, she takes part in demonstration against South African racism. Not about this. And not about this. This is liberation movement warriors. Jane Fonda didn't say anything about that racism. A black killed by blacks simply because he is anti-communist. That's just a symbolic picture. Okay, now next thing, I'm going to show you some slides which are also nothing sensational, but may provoke some questions in your mind. Maybe not. Okay. The more questions you have, the better, because we'll come to systematic explanation of the phenomenon later. Now I want you just to get excited. Hollywood actress talking to Fidel Castro. Nothing wrong, of course. Depends what is the message or what's the subject of talking. I bet you never heard about this fella. He's an American singer, Dean Reed. He's singing in Moscow for some strange reason. And you know what he's singing about? Oppression, civil rights in USA, and about poor Americans who cannot survive. Well, I don't want to be too critical of Pope of Catholic Church, but some statements which he made at the earlier years of his becoming a pontiff of Catholic Church, strikingly unpleasant to me. Communism and church can coexist. Can they? Well, you should ask Russian Orthodox priests who were literally exterminated by the Soviet communists. Communism and church can coexist. I don't think so. Catholic Times. I collected this newspaper in a Catholic church, which I attend, although I'm Orthodox Christian, as Russians, most of them are. But I do come to Catholic church because my wife is a Catholic, so I don't see much difference, because God, I suppose, is one, so Jesus Christ is also the same, which church, whichever you go. But Christians and socialism is something that doesn't really appeal to me. I don't know, how about you? Social justice central to gospel, is it? I never heard about it. Join with Marxists? It's from the same newspaper. And that's how they joined with Marxists. Nicaragua, before Sandinista came to power. A priest with machine gun behind his back. And the machine gun, of course, Kalashnikov, if you know anything about machine guns. Okay, then there are some strange deviations from religious path. What's his name? Jim Jones. Reverend? Nice looking guy with adopted kids, and shaking hands with a politician, Mayor George Moscone, in 1976. Very nice. That's how it all ended, you remember. More than 900 people who poisoned themselves together with their kids in Guyana. This is a very interesting picture. It's not very clear. Instead of Jesus Christ, they put a naked lady, in the church. Strange, huh? Of course it's strange. Crucifix of a woman for Palm Sunday. Boy, Jesus Christ would turn in his grave if he were engraved. Now this is something that also indicates some strange occurrences within the framework of organized religion. In Struggle, a paper with hammer and sickle, published by a Canadian group of Trotskyites, very dynamic, extremely radical group. They challenged the question, whose democracy is this? meaning that Canadian democracy is not democracy at all, simply because that radical group is challenged by the local police, right? So nothing new, we know about this. But look where this paper is being distributed. Political repression, Friday, October, Battle Street, United Church. Strange, eh? See, this is the same leaflet, enlarged. This is another thing. President Carter handed over an antique crown belonged to Church of Hungary to the present communist regime of Hungary. Why? I don't understand. To make them friendlier to church? I doubt. Feminist movement. I don't know how you feel about feminism. I don't think that to be equal with men, you have to politicize your movement. You cannot legislate equality. You have to be equal. But that distracts your mind from real issues of family, loyalty, and well, if you feel moral foundations, and they make a great political capital on that. First Lady of the United States sitting to some kind of, I forget what her name was, exposing her tits to the media. I mean, this is, and by the American media standards, this is something normal, acceptable. A First Lady of the United States together with a lady who burns her bra. I don't know. Well, ladies in the army, of course, I don't know what's your opinion. I never heard about girls in the Soviet army, especially in the infantry force, simply because when they have period, that may create a problem for invasion of, say, Afghanistan. Again, the homosexualism. To be honest, me personally, I don't like the idea of homosexuality. I think it's unhygienic. But homosexuality in the army, making heroes of them, gays on the march? Why? Why to have copulation in a natural manner deserves a public opinion, attention, and a political force? Why to politicize something which doesn't belong to politics at all? In the Soviet Union, we have a joke. Don't mix politics and prostitution. They are already mixed. We know perfectly well, the medical science proved that homosexuality leads to distortion in human psychology. This fellow killed 15 kids after molesting them sexually. We know that most of the agents who were recruited by KGB, including McLean and Guy Burgess, were homosexuals. But we are reading in the media that this is something acceptable. More than that, we are made to believe that these people deserve equal rights and respect. Well, that again is a debatable question, whether to like or not to like certain type of music. Me personally, I don't. These two nice ladies, one is younger, the other is a little bit older, both of them wanted, for some strange reason, to shoot President of the United States, defending the environment of the United States, the green trees and vegetation. Why it takes death of United States President to defend the environment, I don't understand. If you do, please explain. Then, of course, glorifying all kind of national liberation leaders, we naturally provoke our own kids to go into some strange liberation movement. You know who I'm talking about. This is the girl who was abducted by terrorists, and then she became terrorist herself, a daughter of a wealthy publisher. Naturally, there are thousands, millions of kids who loved, adored her courage. This is Comrade Carlos. You know who he was? He was trained and educated in Lumumba University, where I was teaching Russian language to the likes of him. That's the result of the activity when they come back home. Aldo Moro was killed by Red Army terrorists who wanted to liberate Italians from something. I don't know from whom. These are the the persons who were part of Baader-Meinhof gang. And this is a person who also liberates someone from someone. I don't exactly know, obviously, Indians from whites in the United States. But pay attention what he holds in his hand. It's Kalashnikov, AK-47. I know it by heart. I can put it apart with my eyes closed. War on terrorism. Does it exist? Apart from verbal war. This is what I have collected on a campus in Canada. Carleton University, Ottawa. Left-wing tabloids. That's how they instill in the minds of people, young people, that to fight is the only way, the violence, death is the only way to achieve rights of Palestinian people, other people, Quebec separatists, and jobs and peace. Obviously, you cannot get job if you spend all your time walking up and down streets with posters like that. You have to go to a place where the jobs are. And of course, to find a job, the most unsuccessful way to find a job is to read papers like that. Don't feel like working. This is something another. This is a Playboy magazine. Probably you heard the story about Larry Flint, how successful is he to attract attention of media and public opinion by doing crazy things, getting involved in court case of the car manufacturer. Why he wants to do it, I don't know, but what he does attracts some strange mass attention. Playboy magazine makes jokes about Russian sex. That's the image they want to present to American people. But they don't explain to American people that the process of demoralization is not a question of joke. This is Portugal after socialists came to power. On your left is a prostitute who was imported from East Germany to Lisbon. A communist prostitute in a country which is just had its successful socialist revolution. Very interesting. What for? To make money? No, I'll tell you later. On the right, pornographic literature in a country with strong Catholic moral principles. Well, I don't know how many people of you like to drink alcohol. I did. But I noticed that some ads in magazines have some strange desire to joke about alcohol. And the jokes are closely related to justification of Soviet, Russian presence. A prominent Russian joined the secret service. Something to joke about while you drink vodka. I don't see any humor in that. Do you? I don't know. Okay, this is a number of advertising of alcohol for which Canadians get into hot water. Comes the revolution, anyone can drink McGuinness vodka. Alberta vodka is superimposed on the picture of cruiser battleship Aurora. I don't know how many of you know that this is a historical relic in USSR. The revolution, communist Bolshevik revolution, started with the cannon fired from that battleship. And obviously Soviet embassy was insulted, so they sent a protest note to Pierre Trudeau, and the picture was removed from the magazine. When I was teaching at Carleton University in Ottawa, my superiors forced me to do an IQ test with two groups of my students. The idea was to answer about 100 questions, to give answer, yes, no, or undecided. The more undecided or negative answers you give, the more, according to the compilers of this test, you are adaptable and useful to society. The more positive answers you give, the more questionable is your adaptability and usefulness for your country. This is explanation how to score, how to count the scores. And now see the questions. Telling dirty joke is bad. A good soldier is a patriot. Yes, no, or undecided. Think about it. Every communist should be run out of the country. Yes, no, or undecided. The Bible is the greatest source of truth. Right? God is everywhere. A person who kills another person is a murderer. Yes, no, or undecided. Okay, now, if you don't believe me, let's come back. See, I want to repeat you once again the conditions of the scoring. The more undecided and negative answers you give, the more you are adaptable and flexible and useful for the society. Do you understand what they are doing to kids? Okay, they are doing two things at a time. They teach them moral relativism. They teach them how to lie to get a greater score. Because obviously a child would say if a person kills another person, he is a murderer. But for the sake of getting a higher score, obviously a student would put no or undecided. So you teach your kid how to lie to be successful and to look adaptable and useful for society. Well, obviously I had to do that test, but I added one more question to that thing. My own question. I said, what kind of society you are going to be useful to? And most of my students give me an excellent answer. They say, a society where there is no moral principle, no respect to God, love, family, and working ethics. Very simple. They are not that stupid. Here we are, Comrade Brezhnev. Now, this is the picture from a Soviet magazine. Obviously, Soviet media tries to project their leaders in the most respectful way. Very impressive, very fatherly, very serious person. There is nothing surprising. What else is new? Of course. But this is Time magazine, an American magazine. The caption is not quite clear, but it says basically that Comrade Brezhnev doesn't give interview to Time magazine. The message is clear. He's a positive, caretaking person. He's too busy to take care of the world problems and economical problems in Russia. It's a very humorous caption. But nevertheless, the impact, if you are not quite concerned about politics, what is your impression about this nice gentleman? Nice, smiling, tired, well. And this is how media presents your leaders. I don't know whether he deserves to be presented like that or not. This is a different question. This is Prime Minister of Great Britain about 10 years ago, together with Beatles. You may or may not like Beatles. Me personally, I don't like them. But a Prime Minister of a country together with entertainers. The Queen, Her Majesty Queen, knighted Beatles, a highest honor which previously in all times was given only to the most deserving patriots of the British Empire, was given to a bunch of monkeys. Valéry Giscard d'Estaing is playing football. He's our guy. He plays piano. No, never mind what he does for politics or world problems. He's nice, charming personality. Helmut Schmidt is taking part in a circus performance. Nice, charismatic leader. Never mind what his policies are. He's popular. He's in the section of people of Time magazine. First Lady of the United States together with the pop singer, folk song singer. Well, so what? You know, we had a saying in Russia that in old times, clowns were entertaining the royalty. Today, the mightiest of the world think it's a privilege to appear with entertainers. Just the reverse of the old principle, you know. They are the entertainers of entertainers. because they want it for their political career. Ed Kennedy dances in Moscow. Why? I mean, is that his business to go to USSR? Why doesn't he occupy himself with something more relevant to the urging problems of the world? He thinks he is going to be popular. In America, maybe, but in Russia, they look at him as a schmuck out of his mind. Senator McGovern is talking to a gorilla somewhere in Africa. Not the gorilla monkey, but a young member of National Patriotic Movement. The movement which is indoctrinated by the Soviets, armed and paid for. He thinks he's smart and he's something to admire. I bet the guys who are standing behind don't think this way at all. Well, Kissinger just by mistake is here. Would you buy a second-hand car from this? Pierre Trudeau, Prime Minister of one of the most developed industrial nations, independent nation in the world, is befriended by Fidel Castro. If you remember, Canada never stopped trade relations with Cuba, despite the urge from the United States government's administrations not to sell Cuba strategic technology and materials. No, he wouldn't listen to the United States. He smiles at Fidel Castro. Meanwhile, his wife, estranged wife, Margaret Trudeau, is talking to rock star. I forget his name. That's it. That's him, right? And he is posing for pictures like that. That's the Prime Minister's wife? That's her too. In French Riviera with some Hollywood actor. Why? 50 years ago, for a thing like that, a prime minister would have to resign. It's a shame for a nation. Not anymore. Okay, now détente. It's another debatable question. Why we are so happy, Comrade Nixon? What is so funny, I would like to ask. Yeah? Yeah, smile again. Why? He's standing next to a mass murderer and he's smiling. Why? Pierre Trudeau also attentively listens to Comrade Brezhnev's, I don't know what. West German chancellor is helping Comrade Brezhnev to stand up because the senile leader of Russia is unable to stand up without Western aid. Well, you may say, well, it's West Germans, they're too close to Russia, probably they do it just in case. Okay, here's the same thing. Carter is helping. The president of the mightiest power in the world, United States, is helping Comrade Brezhnev. You remember the incident when Brezhnev almost stumbled down the staircase somewhere in Vienna, of course. And thanks to Carter, he didn't fall. Andrew Young is talking to a dictator in Africa. Again, McGovern, I think, is talking to Agostino Neto, a Soviet puppet in Luanda. Why? Is it that necessary to be friendly, to smile at each other? Now we're coming to space, from Earth to space. Clouds over the space program. Why clouds? Mind you, this is after 3 or 4 successful landing on Moon. Why clouds? Okay, here's 2 pictures. Left, Soviet cosmonaut walking into Kremlin Hall for a ceremonious reception. On the right, 2 American cosmonauts casually watching TV. On the top, Soviet Politburo talking to the space pilots on orbit. On the lower picture, Lyndon Johnson with, I think that's Glenn, no? An American spice pilot. Now, even if you don't know anything about the theory of information, the comparison, mind you, this is a French magazine, it's not a Soviet propaganda. The comparison of the size of the pictures gives you the message already. What is more important? What is more impressive? Here, a picture from Soviet newspaper Pravda. A Soviet schoolboy compares two replicas of Soviet Soyuz spacecraft and American Apollo. Friendship in space, détente, right? Pay attention to the size of the spacecrafts. They are almost identical, right? Now this is what the size, almost actual size is. The American spacecraft is on the left. It's almost twice as big as the Soviet one, right? Okay, this is a Soviet picture. This is an American picture with true sizes. Okay? You say, well, Soviet media, of course, tries to diminish the successes of the American space program. Now, this is an American media. On the left, a Soviet moon walker or Soviet probe on moon. On the right side, an American space Volkswagen, as they say. It actually was used on the surface of moon. The sizes are almost identical, right? Wrong. The thing on the left is the size of a tea kettle. In other words, about 100 times smaller. But Time magazine does not explain it to the readers. An average person in the United States has an impression that the junk on the left is as important and as successful as the masterpiece of technology produced by American mind and ingenuity. Okay, you remember Skylab? There was a time when it just about to fall down on the United States or any other country. And the Pentagon was very worried. There were pictures, there were discussions on TV. Some strange characters even started joking about it. See the Skylab target. A lot of emotions expressed about the failure of United States Skylab. A lot of bitter opinions were expressed about the unnecessary spending on space research. But when Soviet nuclear-powered satellite fall on the territory of Canada, there was no protest demonstrations, there were nothing like that. Nowhere in the world. Ask yourself why. According to some information, this was not a satellite at all. It was a flying atomic bomb. Canadians spent something like $15 million just to find the junk on their own territory. Thanks God it fell in inhabited areas of Canada, in Northwest Territories, where only penguins live. Or what if it fell on Toronto? A flying nuclear bomb? Oh boy. But no protests. Here, Soviet ambassador Anatoly Dobrynin happily looking at the linking of American and Soviet spacecraft. In where? In American Grounds Control Center. This is a picture from Time magazine. This is also a picture from Time magazine. Soviet citizens are watching the same moment, linking of spacecraft. Think about it. Compare. Here, happiness. On the right, American representative of the NASA and Dobrynin, very happy. That's how ordinary Soviet citizens think about the farce in space. They understand perfectly well that linking spacecraft in space is just a fake. It doesn't mean anything. Look at their faces. They are sad. A dream was realized. Was it worth the price? pessimistic question, right? After all the successes of American space program, the media tries to instill in your mind a doubt, pessimism. Why? Oh, this is a frog. I don't know how much you know about frogs. I'll tell you that a frog can see a mosquito only if it moves across the area of its vision. If a mosquito quietly sits on a grass blade, the frog doesn't notice it. That's the attitude of American media. They do not notice problem unless it moves, and moves close to Hilton where they station. These are the people who may file a suit against me if I call them liars, but that's exactly what they are. They've been lying to you for years and years about the situation in Vietnam, in Russia. They were selling commercials, deodorizers and cars, and they sold you a rotten information, disinformation of what happens in the world. They have a vision of frog, but they look like semi-gods to you. And if I challenge their credibility, probably the people will call me a paranoid or a very nasty person. I may be a nasty person, but that's my opinion. I was a person who used to take these people for a ride when I was working for the Soviet side. Okay, if you don't believe me, here, one of the most conservative newspapers, in this particular case it's a Canadian newspaper, the Globe and Mail, editorial page. Nothing special, right? The malaise of liberal democracies. Saving Bhutto, former president of Pakistan, called priority. And then there is another article on the right here. U.S. out to dominate Pacific, Russians claim. Well, obviously somebody's opinion, right? Nothing unusual for an average reader. Russians claim that United States out to dominate Pacific. The idea is that, well, United States is obviously aggressive and they want to dominate something and Russians are unhappy about it. Somebody says. You read an article and probably you may agree or disagree, but you have a feeling, the message of urgency. The nasty Americans again out to dominate Pacific. Now look who is the author. Alexander Malishkin, Novosti Press Agency. Not a word. Who is Malishkin and what is Novosti Press Agency? An average reader will accept this article as a legitimate, overt expression of an ordinary journalist. It is not an opinion. It's a fabrication by an extension of KGB. Novosti Press Agency is an organization for which I worked for 12 years. This is highest example of dishonesty and disinformation. Just one line more would explain to an average reader what is that he is reading. But alas, there is no explanation. Now this is the monument to Mother Russia in former Stalingrad. Now it is Volgograd. The statue is designed to instill feeling of patriotism and I don't know what else. Pride maybe for the motherland. These are the pictures of construction, high-rise apartments in Moscow, glorious achievement of Soviet technology, caviar as an average staple food of Russians. These are the minks and furs that Soviet citizens wear. You know, that's how they look when they relax. Fat, nice ladies, you know. You think it's Soviet propaganda? No, comrades. This is also some fashions, latest fashions from Russia, right from Kremlin, for an average Soviet housewife. Well, obviously, it doesn't take much intelligence to understand that this is not quite true. And obviously, it has something to do with the Soviet propaganda. The myths and the realities of the KGB. You see, you don't see the... From Stalin to Kosygin, The Myth and the Realities, by Avril Harriman, a former ambassador of the United States to USSR. Very complimenting article to the Soviet system. And this is where it comes from. You thought it was from a Soviet magazine, right? No, it's from Look magazine, an American magazine which published that crap. If you don't believe me, I'll tell you that I was a person who accompanied a group of journalists from Look magazine when they came to Moscow on invitation from Novosti Press Agency. I made them to publish that thing, for which I was awarded, I received the bonus, a free ticket to Italy for a week. Now, this has looked like sheer high-class idiocy, but unfortunately, this is exactly what happened. It didn't took me much effort to convince the Americans, to tell the American journalists from Look magazine, to bring back this magazine, to dedicate the whole issue to the glorious anniversary of Soviet Revolution. This is what you were reading in your American magazine. This is how an average American perceived the Soviet way of life. A happy Soviet citizens. This is what an average girl in Russia wears. This is what they eat and drink. This is how they build their apartment houses. And this is how they're fiercely patriotic. Amazing. Anyway, so I will explain you how it all happens. The last two pictures I will not comment. I want you simply to look close into these eyes. This is the person who wants to liberate you, wanted at least. Not anymore, he is dead. But there are many other people with the same type of eyes. If I were a deeply religious person, my answer to that picture would be, these are the eyes of a Satan. He is nice fellow, right? United Nations celebrated back in 1969, I think, the 100th anniversary of his birthday. The greatest leader of mankind. God forbid us to have leaders like that. Well, that's all.